Tears are falling. A young officer weeps, reflecting over his past, disgusted at his present, and hesitant about his future. As he stands in front of a certain statue, regret fills his heart. He wonders if his life has been in vain up to this very moment, and what fate has in store for him. The previous year, this man had just given a eulogy for his aunt Julia. This aunt was the wife of a famous general, revolutionary, and leader of the Roman Republic named Marius, who had been deceased for some decades. This man giving the funeral oration in honor of his aunt likewise included his wife Cornelia in the speech, since she too had recently passed. The couple had a daughter together. Her name also was Julia. During this somber occasion, the speaker noted how his aunt, and himself by extension, descended not only from a royal line, but more importantly, a divine one. This man asserted that his family, the Julii, were the descendants of Venus, the goddess of love, also known as Aphrodite to the Greeks. Now, a year later, here he is, remembering, weeping, regretting, before an adorned statue in Cadiz, southern Hispania, near the Rock of Gibraltar, known as the Pillar of Hercules during this time. The statue is of Alexander the Great, a hero of the ancient world, a man who many of that time wanted to emulate, but none had ever come close. But Alexander was not just a man in their eyes, he was a god. The young king from Macedonia, who had conquered much of the known world, spreading civilization as he saw it in the process. But the conqueror's life was abruptly cut short at the age of 32 due to malaria, typhoid, or poisoning. But his death produced a cult following, literally. Numerous people revered him as divine and built worship sites to him. When he himself was alive, Alexander likewise believed his true father was Zeus himself, or to the Romans known as Jupiter. To many of his contemporaries, he truly lived up to his claim of divinity. Now, nearly 250 years later, a man is weeping beside one of Alexander's many statues that dot across the landscape of the classical world. This man had claimed to be a descendant of kings and gods, but what had he to show for it? Do you think it is matter for sorrow that while Alexander, at my age, was already king of so many peoples, I have as yet achieved no brilliant success? Like many of us, he was comparing his life to the lives of others, contrasting his perceived failures to the great successes of those around him and before him. At the age of 16, this man in question had become the leader of his household after his father's untimely death. As a youth, he survived one of the bloodiest Roman civil wars and purges during the dictatorship of Sulla, the political rival of his uncle by marriage, Marius. This man, being the nephew of Marius, and also the son-in-law of Cinna, Marius' right-hand man, was set to be executed. Although Sulla pardoned him, the dictator warned that within this man were many Mariuses, that is, many a revolutionary. He joined the military and distinguished himself in combat during the siege of Mytilene, an island off of Asia Minor. A few years later, Cilician pirates kidnapped and held the young man for ransom. However, the youth remained cool and collected, while at the same time being cocky, jesting to the pirates that they should even triple the ransom amount. He strangely enough befriended his captors, and had quite a jovial time with the pirate crew. However, amongst all the joking and revelry, the young captive would warn that when he eventually was rescued, he would have all of them crucified. Thus, when the Roman government eventually paid the ransom, he personally saw fit to have the pirates crucified. He was then elected as a military tribune and quaestor soon after. Thus, he became both a military and a civic officer, the first steps on the Roman political ladder, also known as the cursus honorum. After the passing of his wife Cornelia and Aunt Julia, he was commanded to serve his tenure in Hispania, or modern-day Spain. Now, age 32, this man is in mourning over the hardships and failures of his life, and wondering, would he be as great as Alexander? Will he continue his mediocre career, perhaps, and become a footnote of history like so many others? Or would he climb his way to the top of society, and possibly to the heavens? This man, named Gaius Julius Caesar, would strive with all of his being to become the greatest of all the Romans, uprooting the very foundation of his world. And his feats up to this point of his career would pale in comparison to what he would accomplish in the latter half of his life. Now the rest of this man's life was an even greater flex. After his service in Spain, he returned to Roman politics and remarried. And this wouldn't be his last remarriage. He married Pompeia, the granddaughter of his previous rival, the cruel dictator Sulla. Later, he was elected as High Priest of Rome, or Pontifex Maximus, and befriended the two most powerful men in Rome. Crassus, the richest man in the country and the guy who defeated Spartacus, and Pompey Magnus, a flamboyant general who conquered much of the Eastern Mediterranean in the name of the Roman Republic. These three men became known as the First Triumvirate, the rule of three men. More famously, Caesar was given command over several legions to finally pacify the Gauls. The Gallic Wars, as they were called, lasted for about a decade and incorporated much of what is now France, Belgium, Western Germany, the Netherlands, Luxembourg, and Switzerland into the Roman Republic. One of Caesar's greatest achievements and boasts during this campaign was his building of an impressive bridge across the river Rhine to intimidate the Germanic tribes, only to cross back into Roman territory and destroy this magnificent bridge. Likewise, during the siege of Alesia, he built great walls and palisades around the last Gallic holdout, while also building another set of walls to enclose himself and his troops from outside interference. In other words, he was sieging others while also being under siege himself. But the flexing doesn't stop here. Seeing the failures of the corrupted republic, the rampant greed among the Roman elites, and the state's neglect of the common people and veterans, Caesar decided to just march on Rome and reform the government by force. He led a fraction of his soldiers across the Rubicon River and ominously uttered, "Iacta alia est," or "the die is cast." This action, of course, sparked a civil war, where again Caesar just demolished his opponents, including his once friend and rival Pompey Magnus. In the middle of the civil war, he went on vacation with Cleopatra, had a child with her, continued the war, and eventually won, with finally being elected dictator for life. To celebrate his victories following this ancient world war, he held a series of triumphs in Rome, akin to lavish military parades in 46 and 45 BC. These 5 triumphs celebrated his victories over barbarian kingdoms as well as his Roman opponents during the Civil War, such as in Gaul, Egypt, Pontus, Africa, and Spain. An inscription on one of the showpieces in the procession read, "Veni, Vidi, Vici," or "I came, I saw, I conquered," accentuating the speed, shock, and awe of his command. With his face painted red, imitating the god Jupiter, and a laurel crown encircling his head as to signify his successes, Caesar drove a 4-horse chariot down an avenue in Rome, being flanked by praise and acclamations from both soldier and citizen. During these festivities, he dedicated a temple to his divine ancestress and protector Venus. This indeed was the pinnacle of Caesar's career. A couple of years later, he was elected dictator for life. Only that life was cut short, quite literally, when his friends backstabbed him. But the man would not just go down. Even in death, he would not die. After he just grew tired of being stabbed to death, about 23 times in total, he finally gave up the ghost. The great Caesar had died. During his life, Julius Caesar had reformed the Roman calendar, which is the basis for the Western calendar, with a few edits here and there under Pope Gregory XIII. Also, the month of Quintilis was renamed to July in Julius's loving memory. Additionally, his name became a Roman political title, with each leader of Rome following his death calling themselves Caesar. Render to Caesar that which is of Caesar's. And yet, following his untimely death, his great-nephew, adoptive son, and successor Octavian, later honored with the title of Augustus, deified the late Caesar. In this way, his adoptive father would not only be forever memorialized, but worshipped for years to come. In essence, Caesar finally achieved what he wished for all those years ago in front of that statue of Alexander. He had become a god to both Romans and non-Romans. And cunningly, Augustus made himself the son of a god, an association which brought with it great cachet and prestige for the years to come, in remolding the Roman Republic into a Roman Empire. Like, share, subscribe. See you next time.